Hello and most welcome to 1787 of the series. We will today continue with the article that we began and went into at latest with 1784. The New Jerusalem, wealth, ancient building projects, and Revelation 21 to 22 by Moss and Feldman. And last time we discussed measurement. We also talked extensively of how participating is important or a sine qua non for the words to have their meaning. And we also mentioned that the splendor can bedazzle. It can divert your attention from the most important, and that's the presencing of heaven on earth. So the observer needs to be brought into all the contexts. Otherwise, the observer will not be able to enjoy none of the spiritual gifts. He will be by himself neglected from entering. So it speaks powerfully to our participatory possibilities. And measuring is a very important point there. By measuring the heavenly temple, by measuring the city, we make God real. God will not be real, cannot become real if we do not participate. Often, or I would say too often, participation today is neglected. We can continue the read on chapter 2, elite dwellings in the Roman Empire. At the same time, while the author of Revelation was probably familiar with eschatological expectations about the heavenly city and new or renewed temple, it is equally possible that he contextualized the New Jerusalem in light of real world man-made constructions. On purely literary grounds, Revelation presents Rome and the New Jerusalem in similar terms. Thereby suggesting that we should, in some sense, read them together. Though this line of argument is not, to our knowledge, advanced by any modern scholars, it seems likely that the descriptions of the New Jerusalem call to mind the high-class and imperial building projects of the day. Given Revelation's demonstrable animus towards Roman imperial power, it is easy to see why the relationship between them has been overlooked. While golden streets seem otherworldly and implausibly decadent to modern ears, Serena's letter to Seneca reveals that houses of precious jewels and gold were a reality for ancient Romans. The purpose of this article is to consider how Revelation's heavenly city would have been received by those familiar with ancient architecture and decor. And subsequently, how this might affect our reading of the New Jerusalem. Perhaps the best known example of first century Common Era architectural decadence is Nero's Domus Aurea. Built only a few decades before the composition of Revelation, the Golden House was known for its extensive use of golden leaf, bejeweled walls and ceilings, glassy floors, and monumental gardens, complete with an artificial lake, streams and trees. The most extended description of the Domus Aurea is found in the writings of Nero's highly critical biographer, Suetonius. According to Suetonius, the house stretched from the Palatine to the Esquiline. And we can read this in one go without movement of the lines. Its vestibule was large enough to contain a colossal statue of the emperor 120 feet high, and it was so extensive that it had a triple colonnade a mile long. There was a pontoon like a sea, surrounded with buildings to represent cities, beside tracts of country varied by tilled fields, vineyards, pastures, and woods, with great numbers of wild and domestic animals. In the rest of the house, all parts were overlaid with gold and adorned with gems and mother of pearl. There were dining rooms with fretted ceilings of ivory, whose panels could turn and shower down flowers, and were fitted with pipes for sprinkling the guests with perfumes. The main banquet hall was circular and constantly revolved day and night like the heavens. The luxurious adornments that form part of the construction of the house were not, in the opinion of Tacitus, its most remarkable or unique feature. He writes, Nero availed himself of the ruins of his country and built a house in which not so much the gold and precious stones were to be marveled at. Things which, in the luxury of the times, were long since usual and familiar to all, as the fields, pools, and great lonely woods, and open spaces, and broad vistas. Tacitus's statements both draw attention to the remarkable gardens that form part of structure and direct us to the predictable quality of jewels and gold, which he describes as usual and familiar. It was the scale of a palace that could encompass a rural wonderland in its enclaves that most impressed observers. The Domus Aurea has a certain exceptional quality to it. In addition to being an imperial palace of enormous size, its construction did not include bathrooms, sleeping quarters, or even a kitchen area. The palace was built for entertaining and dining, but not for living. The extraordinary layout of rooms led Wallace Hodrill to speculate that Nero intended to share the palace with the citizens of Rome. If this theory is correct, the palace was constructed as a place for communal and civic celebrations. It defined membership in the civic body of Rome as the prerequisite for entrance and forms an interesting analog to the New Jerusalem in which the faithful will dwell. Though it was fairly quickly destroyed by the construction projects of the Flavian dynasty, this spectacular building project was profoundly influential. It informed the garden-like square of the Templum Pacis, which in many ways responded to the decadence of the Golden House and coincidentally housed many of the treasures seized from the Jerusalem temple towards the end of the Jewish war. Its effects are also felt in Christian ecclesial decorative programs in Rome, Ravenna, and Constantinople, in which the Neronian innovation of tracing mosaics onto the ceilings became a feature of Christian art. The Golden House was only one of numerous luxuriously decorated villas in Rome and Roman cities around the empire. In ancient society, as at many other moments in time, private houses were one means by which the elite could inscribe their identity and status. The affluent engaged in competitive building projects designed to overshadow their neighbors, starting in the 2nd century before Common Era. Roman elites began to construct elaborate and extravagant homes as means of displaying their wealth. Among other functions, These homes hosted lavish banquets and even served as a staging ground for political life. For Rome's elite, the use of precious metals and stones in unexpected locations was one way that wealth was displayed. According to Suetonius, the Emperor Caligula adorned the sterns of boats with gems. In his critique of bathing practices, Seneca offers a glimpse into the expectations of aristocratic lifestyle. We think ourselves wretched if our walls do not gleam with large and expensive mirrors, if our Alexandrian marbles are not set off by Numidian stone. We have become so luxurious that we will have nothing but precious stones to walk on. Seneca is, of course, exaggerating for rhetorical effects, but his words, though hyperbolic, contain an element of truth. Rumors is not the reality of jewel and gold encrusted houses circulated widely. The gemstones and precious metals that adorn the walls and gates of the New Jerusalem were already a reality for some of the wealthy. Nero and the author of Revelation were not the first to think of placing gardens and water features inside the walls of the home. Elaborate gardens were a feature of the Roman Republic. Pastoral imagery figured highly in murals and frescoes, and there's evidence that some villas were constructed so that the householder could watch agricultural scenes from the inside. The presence of trees inside private familial spaces is also well attested. Pliny provides evidence of the regular practice of creating country houses which go by the name of hori, actually within the city. Trees were luxury items in the gardens of wealthy Romans. There's evidence to suggest that some of the trees that grew inside villa complexes were citrus trees, just as the tree of life inside the New Jerusalem is a fruit tree. While these trees certainly did not yield 12 kinds of fruit concurrently, citrus was, broadly speaking, a plant that was associated with health, healing, and the avoidance of decay. Citrus trees were also thought, according to ancient writers, to produce fruit all year round. In Discorides' description of citrus, the tree bears fruit all seasons. We might summarize with Clément's Agnew that the tree was probably considered as a miraculous plant. The impulse to challenge and rival nature extended beyond merely bringing the countryside into man-made spaces. Even the boundary between sea and land was open to coercion and manipulation. Plutarch dwells on the building projects of Lucullus, whose wealth enabled him to alter the landscape so that he suspended hills over enormous tunnels, circled his residences with moats linked to the sea and with streams for the breeding of fish. When Tubero the Stoic saw them, he called Lucullus Xerxes in a toga. Caligula, disregarding the cost of his constructions, attempted to do what people said was impossible. He built up plains to the level of mountain peaks and raised mountains flat with the plain and built moats out into the deep and stormy sea. In her work on luxury in the Roman Empire, Catherine Edwards remarks that, not content with rearranging the boundary between land and sea, Caligula went one better and constructed boats that contained trees and gardens. Such excesses undoubtedly elicited admiration and envy, but they also invited judgment from those concerned about public morality. This was true from the Republic onwards, as Cicero remarks. I scorn luxurious country places, marbled walks and paneled ceilings. Take those artificial streams, which some of our friends call Niles or Eurypy, who, after seeing what we have before us, would not laugh at them. Seneca, too, balked at the artificiality that characterized luxurious building projects by writing. Wherever the shore curves wounding to a bay, there will you at once lay foundations, and dissatisfied with any land unless it is artificial, you will bring the sea within your boundaries. Efforts to bring nature inside the artificial world offended Cicero and Seneca, but it seems to have been a common aspiration. One of the chief criticisms of the Domus Aurea was the manner in which its form as a country villa transgressed the cultural divide between town and country. And here I would say actually I will continue. Not every architectural and ornamental feature of Revelation's New Jerusalem was paralleled in Roman architecture. Nevertheless, those elements discussed here should be sufficient to show that the appearance of the New Jerusalem had real-world counterparts in the homes of the wealthy elite. Merely identifying parallels between one set of structures and another, however, is insufficient. The resonances with Roman decor and building projects are only useful if they inform our interpretation of the passage. Thus, it is to this question that we now turn. And here we end 1787. And do note the last words on page 361. This last time we were discussing border lines and how the Roman emperor, starting with the golden house of Nero, started incorporating nature into the palaces, thereby making them even more glorious. As we see on page 357, Nero's Domus Aurea, I start with, this is the second paragraph, built only a few decades before the composition of Revelation, the Golden House was known for its extensive use of golden leaf, bejeweled walls and ceilings, glassy floors, and monumental gardens. And listen now, complete with an artificial lake, streams, and trees. There is a longing here to incorporate the outside within the domains of the inside. The Domus Aurea is not mostly famous for its gold or jewels, but because it incorporated surrounding areas. You will find forests, pastures, gardens, lakes, even the sea itself, and maybe to my ears, the most fantastic of all, live streams that not only were live, but also contained fish, breeding fish. As we know from Terence Marks Charlo and Susie Froebel, this bordering between the outside and the inside is where reality itself stems from. So the authors of the article is, I would say, inadvertently and unconsciously pointing to what makes something real and valuable. It is when the outside come to join the inside, when the Klein bottle comes alive, but also how everything that has an existence need the bordering areas to go into each other. I think you here would be recommended to remember the Norwegian coast and how it's not made up of the massive or essential coastline made of stone and atoms, nor is it made up by the surrounding sea, or not even the borderline, but how the sea come into the firm terra firma of the atoms and vice versa, how the firmity of the ground comes into the sea. Only a child, Terry McStallo mentioned, would see it, that it was the condensed matter of the Norwegian coastline that was the coastline. So neither did Nero nor Caligula, it seems like, believe that by placing gold or bejeweled spectacles everywhere, wealth would be exposed. No, it is the entering of the outside which is the highest form. And here's the connection with Christianity. When the outside, that is use, or what we do with the concept, if we do liturgy, if we actually sing the psalms and the hymn, and if we do it in the original terms, not changing them or making up new words, it will have the same meaning. And we will not have to go into the dwellings of the Platonic cave and look for originals. That is childlike. The truth is in the tournament of the opposing sides. Also, something we mentioned earlier on from Heidegger, aletheia and theia. In Wittgenstein, it's the action, the use, which brings about the outside and the inside and makes them come alive by participating in the outsideness, in the Carlo-Rovellian quantum relationships. No wonder Tubero the Stoic, when he saw them, he called Lucullus Xerxes in a toga. Well deserved, whether it was criticism or praise. Kalle Lundahl, please come in with comments.
Thank you, thank you. Speaking of the Golden House, I would like to bring in paper. Let me see if I can open it. By Van Kotten. And I think that the two authors made a mistake. They made an omission of not mentioning this paper by Van Kotten. Are you able to see it, Hans?
Yes, it's clear.
Good, good, good. It's an excellent paper, I find it. And I will go to the part with the Domus Aurea. It's the second mentioning here. So Van Kotten writes like this. This opposition of three cities, the expectation that Rome will be destroyed by fire a final time, the image of Jerusalem in Judea as under siege, and the description of the New Jerusalem as golden, read as a deliberate undermining of Nero's New Rome, with at its heart the Golden House, the Oikea Krisi, or the Domus Aurea as it's called in the ancient authors. So Van Kotten mentions that the New Jerusalem will be golden, and it's an allusion to Nero's Golden House. So I think there is more actually to the juxtaposition between Domus Aurea and Jerusalem. Absolutely, it's important. I see in the book of Revelation many allusions to Emperor Nero, but also to the Domus Aurea and even to the fire of Rome. Let me now mention something else. And as Morse and Feldman rightly point out, is that it was the scale of the palace that could impose a rule of Wonderland in the same place that most impress observers. And it's outside that enters inside, as you mentioned, Hans.
And just to make it real, whether it would be just gold, it would be unreal, a fantasy, so to speak.
And I like this hypothesis by Andrew Wallace Harrell. He speculates that Nero intended to share the palace with the citizens of Rome.
Definitely, to let them in.
So this is, Nero would be like a Democrat, so to say, in one way. And I tend to believe in this theory because Nero was extremely popular with the masses. And we tend to forget that. And many tyrants during the history have been very popular within the masses. And why is this important? Yes, Nero is a type of Antichrist. And Antichrist is able to seduce the masses and most people. And here is a way of actually seducing people. Is he didn't build it for himself, but for everybody, if the theory is correct, so to say.
Letting in the masses is also sort of a way of letting the outside in to make the inside work.
Excellent,
If it were
Hans,
to be
excellent.
isolated, it wouldn't have the same value.
Absolutely, absolutely. Excellent. There was something else. No, it wasn't this. Indeed, I absolutely agree with these two authors about Moss and Feldman, and it lines up what one Gordon says about the parallels between Nero and Homo saurian and Rome. Absolutely. Let me see. Yes, yes, I like this. Let me see. They got this. This is amusing detail. They got it. Yes, this. The golden streets seem otherworldly and impulsive decadent to modern years.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would like to see something. There was, it was some 10 years ago. There was this golden toilet. Who was the modern artist who made this golden toilet? It was some famous artwork. Who was it again? It was an Italian. Catalan. This is very decadent.
Mm-hmm.
American sculpture created in 2016 by the Italian artist Mauricio Catalan, an example of satirical participatory art. It's a fully functioning toilet made of 18-karat solid gold. And it was stolen.
Yes.
So here the participants could actually sit there and feel it.
Yeah. I have a live example here. We're reading a text now in a certain subject. I won't mention the subject. I don't want to point something out. But the book, originally published in the early 2000s, became very popular. And then the author remade it. He put in an extra 100 pages, and that was mostly done with more complicated, nonsensical, like academia words. And even the introduction, we had to really try our heads to what he was meaning. And in the end, I think the professor said he's not meaning anything, he's just writing academia. I think nothing could be clearer as the golden toilet than modern academia. And what the professor said, there is no meaning to academia. I heard that at least 40 times when I was studying at the university, and that was in the 90s. So there indeed, the golden toilet. Very good, Kalle. I think we just hit the 1 hour mark here, and I'm really hungry. And
yes, let's stop there and let's the readers have a full view of the participatory toilet, and you can
it's
end there.
beautiful, though. I can't say anything about it because weren't it not made from gold, it would look pretty horrific. I hope no one has used it so far. Well, indeed, thank you very much, Kalle Lunda, for participating. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Have a very pleasant morning, afternoon, day, or evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye for now.